Road Warrior. The 1980s were a whirlwind of shows, competitions, photo shoots, and all the craziness that comes with being single and on the road. Rick Skinner, the Midwest rep for HO, took me on a 10-day tour of Michigan and Wisconsin, don't you know. We hit the road to call on Rick's dealers all over the region. Munson Marine in Illinois was an important stop. They had a giant showroom filled with dozens of boats stacked up on the walls. Fort Fremont in Wisconsin was everything a guy in his 20s could want. The huge weekend sale and bash was backed up with a live band, raging party, and ski show on the river. At one of our stops, Rick organized my first autograph signing, which he'll never let me forget. We went to the Indianapolis Speedway where we stood on the track at the brick-inlaid start-finish line. In other cities, we entertained dealers at the local bars and restaurants. Rick and I laughed it up at a comedy club during our Lansing tour stop. We cruised the clubs on Rush Street in Chicago. All expenses were on HO. Thanks, Herb. Hanging out with Shredder was always a kick. Eddie Roberts, the HO competition director, was always entertaining. For years, he had me convinced that government spies were following us. He messed with me, and I did my best to get him back. The only thing that ever messed with his head was the boogers I put on the rearview mirror of his rental car. In Shreveport, at the Water Ski Nationals, we got into a wrestling match. He had 15 years on me in age, but more than enough in street experience. In nothing flat, I was on the ground with a broken swatch. That was the last time I wore a watch. Another time, in San Diego, with Eddie and a large group from HO, I spontaneously pretended to choke at a crowded restaurant. He knew I was messing around, but played along. Eddie came around my back and performed the Heimlich maneuver. I coughed up a big chunk of steak, much to the horror and relief of the other diners. Fun with meat. The annual HO party was another event we always looked forward to. Before the bash, we had the annual sales meeting. All the reps came in from around the country to get fired up for the following year. HO was such an industry leader that the unveiling of the new line was always one of the year's highlights. We were among the first who saw the next great thing in water skiing, whether it was an innovative design, brand new way to ride, or trend-setting graphics. HO was always groundbreaking in the industry. Saturday was party day, and we were always on the water. Everyone from the company was invited for food, fun, and of course, skiing. The energy was tremendous. People loved working for Herb, and it felt like a great big family. The festivities continued with the more intimate evening party at Herb's house. Volleyball, pool, ping pong, and basketball were the appetizers, and barbecued salmon fillets were the main course. On one such weekend, Herb took about 20 of us out for dinner at the Space Needle. We rode the high-speed elevator to 500 feet above Seattle and stepped into the slowly revolving restaurant. I brought my wife Shauna, and we were dazzled with the panoramic view of the city skyline and Mount Rainier. The food was fabulous, and the fellowship was even better. It was deeply satisfying to enjoy the spoils of victory as a member of a winning team. We had the best of everything. In the late 1980s, there was a concerted effort by the American Water Ski Association to prepare itself for another try at the Olympics. Water skiing was a demonstration sport at the 1972 Munich Games, and Ricky McCormick was the USA standout with 2 gold medals in slalom and tricks. The AWSA was doing its part to position water skiing for another shot at the Olympic Games. One of the things AWSA needed to do was grow, and they did it by adding several new sport divisions. Barefooting, show skiing, and kneeboarding were just a few of the disciplines that came under the umbrella of the AWSA. When the American Kneeboarding Association came under the umbrella of the American Water Ski Association, it signaled a change in kneeboarding. The American Kneeboarding Association tightened up the reins on the way tournaments were organized and run. While some of the down-home fun was lost in the transition, the AKA gained a powerful ally with the AWSA. Event insurance was one of the huge benefits. The national recognition with the governing body for U.S. water skiing helped too. AKA membership grew quickly over the next few years. The dream of kneeboarding at the Olympics didn't seem so far-fetched because kneeboarding was still the hottest thing on water. In 1989, I managed to climb the ladder one more time to the top of the kneeboarding world. Things were a lot different for me personally. I was in school studying full-time to become a chiropractor with almost 30 units per semester. I went to school during the day and worked on the LA Harbor docks at night. I studied whenever I could and didn't get in much training. I was not the best rider that weekend in Oklahoma City, but the weather was on my side. It was windy and the water was rough. I was ecstatic. I grew up skiing on the West Coast where water access was limited and there were lots of people vying for limited space. The Colorado River and the Marine Stadium were great places for showing off, but the water was often rough. When I did get to train, it was usually in the bumps and waves. The rough Oklahoma City conditions suited me perfectly. Not so for the boys from Florida. They had lakes galore and miles of flat water. Most everyone complained about the poor conditions, but I was ready to go. On the first day, there was a strong headwind down the slalom course. The maximum number of passes you could make was 5, so I opted to end my run with the final pass at 35 off into the headwind. That meant starting at 15 off, a pass that open riders never bothered with. Sometimes strategy, not skill, was the deciding factor in competition. As a KG veteran, I made all 5 passes and won the slalom. Everyone else was so far behind going into the second day that all I had to do was a conservative run. That was perfect for the rough water conditions. Mark Richard, Mario Fossa, and Ted Bevilacqua had to stick with their big runs to catch up, which were made even tougher by the wind and waves. It was my last Nationals overall victory, and I knew it was time to hang it up as a kneeboard competitor. I had other mountains to climb, and the riding level was getting beyond my desire to keep up with. The risk-to-return ratio was not to my liking. It wasn't worth abusing myself to try and win something I had already won 3 times. My experiences with the AKA were phenomenal. Kneeboarding was new, and we were young. The guys I came up with were part of a special group who literally invented a new sport day by day. We had fun being the acrobatic stars of the water skiing world. It was our 15 minutes of kneeboarding fame. The pressure to win was off, so I returned to my roots of riding for fun. Next up on the free riding schedule was the 1990 filming for Water Ski Magazine's Kneeboard Authority. HO was the sponsor of the instructional video, so HO Team Kneeboarders Ted Bevilacqua, B.B. Anderson, and I were the featured kneeboarders. Before we got going, Guy, F not a P, Phillip, pulled me aside. He wanted to know if I would give up top billing for Ted Bevilacqua. I was a little surprised, just coming off my 3rd overall title. The burning desire I had to win and stay on top had carried over to this project. It's a fine line between confidence and cockiness. But it wasn't long before I came to my senses. It felt right to step aside for the team. I may have had more recent success in competition than Ted, but he was admittedly a better freerider. For years, Ted was known for his stylish riding in big air. He pioneered big hits off other boats' wakes while growing up on the intracoastal waterway in Florida. It was astounding to watch videos of him throwing massive rolls off head-high stern rollers from a series of oncoming boats. It was nice to have his big moves for the video, but his distinctive style was important too. It was easy to see his roots in surfing as he rode the kneeboard. During filming for the Kneeboard Authority, Ted pulled off dozens of his signature move, the back-to-back 720. He made the 2 complete spins with a single handle pass that looked so effortless. I knew it wasn't. The massive photo boat and wake from the crew at Florida Film and Tape was a real launching pad. All of us aired it out, but Ted took everything a notch bigger. His layouts were sky high, and he was in the hunt to be the first one to ride away from a double back roll. He tried at least a dozen, and the crashes were brutal. On a few, he was oh so close. "You gotta love to crash" was his mantra for the video, and he definitely lived up to it. B.B. Anderson, top women's rider, was our 3rd, and we all had a great time riding and filming. Bright colors were still in, and the real film footage looked spectacular. A lot of our best shots also ended up in commercials for the Michelob Dry Pro Tour and all around the industry. Back then, I believed that Mountain Dew and Milky Ways were a key to my success. And maybe they actually were.